What's going on, y'all? It's Aquila Beats. You can just call me Ak. And today we're going to be doing more of like a Churchill Downs, dark Drake, Jack Harlow type beat. And in this video, I'm going to be going over some music theory tips and other things like that that aren't just like, the basic half steps make it evil. We're really going to be going in depth into music theory and overall just showing you how to get that sound. So first I'm going to break down the sample and then we're going to go into doing the beat. First sound selection is super key. I'm just going to sound from my newest Shadows bank called Churchill's. Made it for this song basically. But let's get into showing you how to actually do these chords. So it does look a little bit complicated. I've got some notes going all over the place, but this is actually really simple. So if you look at this, I got bass notes going down, up, some notes in the middle going, but every single one of these is built off a C minor chord. You can see to make a C minor chord, you go C, D sharp, G. And if you look in basically every single one of these, there's a C, G, D sharp, C, G, C, F, but I'll break that down a little bit more. And same thing here, C, G, D sharp, and then here it's a D instead of a D sharp, which again, I'll break down. So what I did is I actually started off with a C minor chord for everything, and then I just did inversions. All inversions are is you're taking a chord that you've built, and then you move the notes into different places. If you're thinking about building a C minor chord, all you go is C, D sharp, G. It's that simple. But what I did for this is I actually took this D sharp, pitched it down an octave, control down on the arrow key, and then I took this C, pitched it up an octave. You can hear the difference it makes just doing that. You can hear just by taking that C minor chord and inverting it, it completely transforms the entire sound of the chord. And what I love about this kind of chord is it's not like super dark, not super evil, but it's more like this haunting feeling, which I think you really are getting in Churchill Downs. But now we're going to get into how to do these suspended chords. So first I'm going to come in here, get the scale, and you can see this is what a C minor scale looks like. So to build that C minor chord, I did C, skip the note D, put a D sharp, skip the note F, G. That's how you get the C minor chord. But you can notice in this one, this isn't a C minor chord, but it's a suspended chord. So what you do to get a suspended chord is instead of having this D sharp, you go to the next note up in the scale or the next note down in the scale. Here's a regular C minor, a suspended fourth, which is going up, and a suspended second, which is going down. Using these suspended chords is a great way to keep that really dark feeling while not going too drastic and changing chords completely. So you can see all I did was I took that C minor chord right here, and all I did was take the C, pitch it up, take this D sharp, and instead of using the D sharp, go up to the next note in the scale, F. And now you can hear I got this little... And as you can see here, this is also a C minor chord. All I'm doing is I took this G, pitch it down an octave, took the C, pitch it up an octave. And then here, I'm doing the exact same thing I did for the suspended fourth, but for a suspended second chord. So as you can see, we'll take away this G for the moment. All this is a C minor chord, but I'm pitching this up an octave, and I'm taking this note, going one down in the scale, doing a suspended. Then I'm also taking a G, pitching it down an octave, and now we have this. But now we're going to get into a little bit more advanced theory for what I do at the end. You can hear I have this B which isn't in the scale, but what I'm doing is I'm changing the scale. So if you come here again, go to scales, instead of getting the minor natural, get the minor harmonic. You can see the minor harmonic is the exact same as a C minor, but instead of the A sharp, I have this B. All this is doing is adding another half step interval within the scale. And all a half step interval is a note right next to each other. Like here with this G and G sharp, D and D sharp. You can notice in the regular minor scale, there's a whole gap between the A sharp and the C. But if you go over to this scale, B to C, you can see there's now a half step there instead of being an entire whole note away. And all that's going to do, if you've watched other people's music theory tutorials or some of mine, you know that these half steps add a lot of tension. And that's all this is doing. And that's the entirety of that sound. For all these sounds, I don't put any effects on them. Really just an EQ to get rid of some bass. I put a lot of time into sound design in all these sounds, 50 sounds, dark R&B. Really can use it for any kind of R&B. But now we can get into some of the other sounds. So we got a little piano. If you're noticing, I have all the same bass notes as the other sound. Come here. I got the D sharp, C, G, G. Come over here. It's the exact same. And all I'm doing is I'm kind of following the melody of the other one. So I have the F, D sharp, D. You can see that if I bring it over here, it's the exact same right here. The only difference is at the start of this, I'm really just throwing in a D on the piano, which just adds a little more tension. So in essence, I'm really just layering that original pad sound with this piano. Again, that piano is also from the kit. Then finally for the actual synth sounds, I'm getting Do, which is just a cool synth. Then I'm really just playing around with some really random notes. All I'm really trying to do is get some ear candy in here. So I'm just playing notes within the scale, G, A sharp, C, and then I'm adding a bunch of tension right here. So if you come and get this C minor scale, you can see this F sharp's not in here. I'm really just throwing it in there to add a bunch of tension. If you put in for very brief moments notes that aren't in the scale, it'll add a lot of tension and it won't stand out too much to where it just sounds bad. Then you can see I'm doing the same thing here with the C and the B. So all this is doing is adding a little bit of ear candy while adding a little more tension by having all these half-step intervals. But now I'm going to show you how to get the vocals. All I do is record into this plugin called Voice. And all it's doing is it's taking your vocals and transforming it from male voice to a female voice, or any other voice if you want to choose the other ones. Then I'm pitching it up an entire octave. So first I can hear it before I put it in voice. That I need you. I'm really just singing a super simple melody. Then I also have these little background, little breaths and stuff. Just add a little bit more humanness. Sounds a little weird, but adds a little bit of, ambiance and stuff, I think. But then I took that vocal, put it in voice to make it a female vocal. And then I added these effects on here, which is really just an M auto pan to make it go left to right, an EQ to get rid of all the lows and highs, and then another one to really get them out. Then I have a compressor, which is really just taking the quietest parts of the sample, bringing them up, and the highest ones bringing them down. And I'm putting a really high ratio on it because it'll just compress it more. Then I'm adding a reverb, not too much, then a little bit of delay, which most of the time I don't even have it on. Then for the sauce, I'm putting on an H910 harmonizer with drum thickener, and that'll really just fill out the sample and add a really cool texture to it. But then I exported it out, and now we're going to go into how to make the actual drums and the beat with it. So now I'm in a different FLP, and all I did was I took the sample and I pitched it down one semitone. Then I took the BPM, it was at 98 for the sample, pitched it down just to like 96, just to give it a little bit more of a slower feel, because 98 was just a little too fast. But this is what the drums sound like without the sample over top, and I'll be breaking down how I got this bounce. So the key with these kind of drums is you really just want to make sure that you're not doing too much and you're picking pockets with things. So what I mean by that is I'm not having the hi-hat on, two-step, things going all the time. I'm really picking certain pockets and doing very specific rolls to make it very bouncy. So what I do with these beats is I always start out with the hi-hat and the snare just to get a good bounce between those. And you can notice I'm putting a lot of the hi-hat rolls where the snare is hitting, and that'll just accentuate those hits on the snare just a little bit more. But then with the kick, you're not going overboard with it. You're choosing nice little spots to put it in, and you're not doing any crazy hits. So what you're doing for these, Churchill Downs dark bouncy beats is you're having a lot of different sounds, but each one of them is just doing a little bit. Where you're doing a lot of these, kind of hyper trap or, dark trap beats is you have these hi-hats going all over the place, the snares doing a bunch, the 808s doing a bunch of rolls. What you're doing is taking like maybe 4 or 5 different sounds in those beats and doing a bunch with each one of them. But here you can see I have about, 8 or 9 different drum sounds, and each one of them is doing very little. You can see here I got a perk, which is just barely hitting, a rim, which is going every once in a while, a kick is here and there. All you're doing is taking a lot of different sounds and just doing a little bit with each one of them. This, in my opinion, is the key to getting really bouncy drums. Then one thing I love to do is to have the open hats hit where the 808s are. You can see 808 right here. Then when you overlay it with the hi-hat, you can see it's right there. Again, have it here. You have the 808s up here, and you have the open hats hitting. And this will just help accentuate those. It's more of like a West Coast technique I've gotten from watching people like Prob by Infinite, but it really works out for these kind of beats. Then for mixing, all I'm doing is really cutting out the bass of some of these sounds. Then I'm just leveling some of the drum sounds. Again, I maybe have a bit of a controversial theory on mixing, but I believe that 95 Borderline 100% of beats that you make, especially hip hop, where you only have 15 to 20 sounds, you don't need to be doing crazy compressors, all this limiting, all this crazy mixing. Get the levels right and get the sound selection and get the EQs. That is 99% of mixing for these kind of beats. But one little mixing technique you can use in your next beats is what I'm doing here with the pad, where you can see I'm doing a little bit of automation with the EQ. So all I'm doing is I have this EQ tied to the pad, but what this EQ is doing is it's taking out all the bass because you don't want it clashing with the 808. However, before the drums drop, I'm turning off the EQ. So this EQ isn't doing anything at the start, which adds a lot more fullness to the beat because it'll still have all the bass. You can hear what it sounds like with the EQ versus without. This will just make it where, at the start, you still have a very full sounding sample, but then when the drums start, you turn on the EQ and it'll get rid of all the bass to make room for the 808. And then I'm just throwing my tag on there and I'm done.
Can I tell you something?